Hey guys, so let's talk about Stave II of A Christmas Carol. Now, at the end of Stave I, we have the scene where Jacob Marley visits Scrooge to warn Scrooge about what may lay ahead of him, um, because if he doesn't change his ways and so forth. And so Marley gives him a sneak peek into what his future could be like if he doesn't make these changes. So in Stave 2, remember that Marley told him he'd be haunted by three spirits. So the first spirit shows up. Now it's interesting because Marley wakes up. He said that he would visit him at 1. So not Marley, but Scrooge wakes up a little bit before 1 a.m. And kind of lays there and waits for it. Um, then as the bell tolls 1, and he'd pulled his bed curtains all the way through on every side because um, mainly to stay warm, but to give a little privacy. And about the time that the bell tolls 1, immediately this hand reaches in and pulls back the curtain right where Scrooge's face is. And of course, he's startled by that, as anybody would. And then there's this creature standing there, this person. Um, and it's interesting the way it looks. First of all, it's a study in contradictions. It's both old and young at the same time. It has long white hair, but its skin has no wrinkles in it at all, and there's a fresh color, youthful color in it. Its arms look very muscular. Um, it's it's um, it's got a white tunic that's on, um, and a crown that has icicles on it, or is that Christmas present? Well, I don't think it has a crown, but it does have a crown of light that's coming jetting out of the very top of its head. Um, so it's holding a holly leaf in its hand, and then it also has its tunic has summer flowers on it. So it has both things that are kind of opposites. So as I mentioned, it has this jet of clear light coming out of its head, and then his other hand it has a cap, which is a little cylinder thing, that they would use to put the candles out. He has that under his arm, and Scrooge at first is like, who are you? He's like, well, I'm the ghost of Christmas past, and he says, long past, and he says, no, your past, and then asks him why he's there. Um, for there, he said he's there for his welfare, and he says, well, I think a night of unbroken rest would be more conducive to that end. That it'd be better if I can just get some sleep. And of course, the spirit, catches on to this, like, well, I'm here for your reclamation. I'm here to reclaim you. And so basically, they, you know, talk for a minute, and then the spirit starts to lead Scrooge towards the window, and Scrooge is scared he's going to fall because he's mortal. He's not like this ghost, the spirit. So the spirit touches his chest, and he's upheld and carried out the window. And the city just kind of disappears, and he's in the countryside. And Scrooge immediately recognizes where he is. It's where he was bred, it's where he was born, where he was raised as a young boy. And he actually, this hard, crusty, solitary, nasty, mean guy actually sheds a tear. He's actually overcome in some ways with the scene. Then he's taken, as he goes to the town, he recognizes it because this is the town where he went to school, at the boarding school. And he sees a lot of the boys he went to school with. And he calls out, he knows all their names. He calls out to them, and the Spirit tells him, these are the shadows of things that have been. They have known, what does he say? I can't remember, but they don't know who they are. Um, so they don't know they're there. It's all just memories. So Scrooge knows that when they go to the school, there's a boy left there by himself, and it's Scrooge. And Scrooge becomes emotional at that because every Christmas for several years, Scrooge was left there at this boarding house. Nobody came to get him. The other boys went home for the holidays, and he stayed there. And the only friends he had were his books, and he would read Alibaba and Arabian Nights. He would read um, Robinson Crusoe, which is interesting considering that's a book about a guy who gets shipwrecked on an island all by himself. So Scrooge is all by himself. But those were his friends. Those are the people that he read about. Um, and Scrooge is overcome with that, and he thinks at that moment for the first time he starts to realize, my childhood was pretty bad. And he thinks about a boy, the little boy that came to sing a Christmas carol at his door, and he chased him off with a ruler, and he felt bad about it, and thought maybe, well, I should like to have given him something, right? But then the scene changes again, and it's when he's older, and his little sister Fan comes in, and Fan loves her brother. This is the one person in Scrooge's life that is tremendous, just loves her brother, and it's the one, like I said, one member in his family that shows him actual affection and care. And there's a mention of that his father was kind of a mean, maybe overbearing kind of guy. It doesn't tell us why he's always there by himself, but we get the idea there was some kind of, I don't know, whether some kind of rift between he and his father. It doesn't really say, and we could speculate, but Fan promises to bring him home for the holidays, and that he's going to go to work. He's going to become a man, as they say. And Scrooge is touched by seeing his sister again, and the spirit says, she died a woman, right? And he's like, well, yes, she died, and she had, as I think, children. He's like, well, one child, and he goes, and the spirit says, true, your nephew, Fred. It's like, yes, and he feels bad about the way he treats Fred, which he should, right? And what he said to Fred when Fred invited him to dinner. And so he feels bad about that. Then the spirit pushes it ahead to where he goes to Fezziwig's house, or to the warehouse door where Fezziwig, they all lived and worked. We don't know what kind of business Fezziwig was in. It doesn't really matter, but Fezziwig was his boss, and Scrooge is one of the apprentices that worked there that learned how to do business, and he admired Fezziwig a great deal. Fezziwig was there's a vacuum cleaner going on out there. He was a great boss. He was a great teacher to Scrooge. He hoped to be like Fezziwig. And he was overwhelmed to see this guy, and the spirit even pokes fun at him a little bit and says, what's the big deal? What did he do? He threw this party. He spent a couple of bucks on this party. Why should you praise him so much? And Scrooge is like, well, it's not that. It's the fact of how he made our work. He could make it either really hard or make it light. He could treat us like, respectfully, or be mean to us. And at that point, Scrooge is like, oh man, he started thinking about the way he treats Bob Cratchit, right? And just terribly, and he feels bad about that. He wishes he could say something to his clerk at that point. And so Scrooge is then moved out of that scene to another scene where he sees a young woman sitting by herself, and Scrooge has changed. He even mentions that his jolly self has changed. He's a little older. That care and the world have kind of gotten to him, and this pretty young girl, and in a mourning dress, she's in dark clothing as if she's going to a funeral, and she talks about how Scrooge has changed. And this is Belle. We find out his fiance. Shocking, I know, to find that Scrooge was actually engaged to a woman, engaged to that individual. But she talks about how he's changed, that another idol has displaced her, that's the whole idea of gain and greed have taken her place, and he tries to make excuses for it. But she's very steady with him, and they have a contract between them. They're engaged, and in those days, remember that it was the woman that could break the engagement. The man could never break it. Okay, in that time period in England, and she breaks it because he doesn't love her the way he loves after and lusts after money. Of course, he feels he's doing it because he's trying to make a better life for them. But she says, that's not what we decided when we were young. We'd get married, we'd work, do our work and everything to get to a position where we'd have more money, and we'd be patient in our industry. And Scrooge wouldn't do it, and so she lets him go for the love of the man he once was. And in fact, she even makes mention that you wouldn't try to come after me now. I'm a dowerless woman, meaning my father has no money to give you. There's nothing to profit by courting me and being engaged to me. You wouldn't do it now. You did it when we were poor, but you wouldn't do it now. And Scrooge doesn't really have an answer for that either. And so it pains Scrooge to see this, because she's a beautiful woman. She's very kind-hearted, and he just let her go. And in the next scene, to sort of to pour salt in the wound here, Scrooge sees his fiancée, Belle, now married with children. And she seems very happy, and her children and her husband comes home and brings presents, and the kids are so excited. And the husband says, I saw an old friend of yours in the city, and she she kind of guessed correctly that it was Scrooge, and she said, well, yeah, there he was sitting all by himself in his office. I hear that this is 7 years ago, that Marley is, that his partner lies on the brink of death, and there he sat all by himself, and alone in the world. And Scrooge had had enough, and he cries out to the spirit to stop, and haunt me no longer. And he looks at the spirit, and all of a sudden the spirit's face just begins to change, just to all the faces from his past. So from Belle to Fezziwig to his sister to everybody. And he can't stand it anymore, so he grabs the oh the candle uh, cap, okay, and he puts it over the top of the ghost and pushes it to the floor. No matter how hard he pushes, the light still streams out from the bottom. So the light is symbolic of knowledge in the past, and you can try to hide it as best you can. In fact, the Scrooge, the ghost actually mentions that Scrooge throughout all these years had made her wear, or made him wear that cap on his head, um, for many years so he would not remember his past, because he kind of shunned it. And it was, in some cases, it was pretty painful. And so you can imagine why he would do that. But sometimes you have to think about those things in order to kind of push ahead. So Scrooge, the ghost basically disappears, and he just falls on the bed and goes to sleep. So that's the Ghost of Christmas Past, from Stave II. Very important. It kind of gets Scrooge thinking about, hey, I'm kind of a terrible person. Looking at it from the perspective of other people. It gets worse as you go along, especially with the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, the third spirit. But this guy kind of gets the ball rolling, and it's important that we get a fuller picture of Scrooge as an individual, that he's not just this nasty, mean old man. There's actually some layers to him, and the reason why he is that way. So that's Stave II. All right.